Thomas Britt here, back again with another video. It is Monday, March the 27th, 2023, and today I got something really special for you. Over the weekend, I had a sit-down interview with Vietnam veteran, United States Marine Corps Corporal David Zarifis. David was kind enough to grant me an interview, and folks, I'll tell you, he told a great story. Very powerful, gripping, emotional. It really touched my heart, and I think it's going to touch yours. So I can't wait to share this with you. So just want to say thank you so much to David for your service to our country. We really appreciate it, and I was honored to speak with you, so thank you so much. I also want to say thank you to Larry Cappetto. Larry Cappetto has an incredible YouTube channel called Voices of History. I'm going to put a link in the description for you. So I reached out to Larry a few weeks ago, told him I was going to be interviewing David, and he gave me lots of really good advice, and he was very supportive and very helpful, very knowledgeable. Larry's interviewed more than 1,000 veterans over the last 20 years. So and as Larry said, history is best learned by the people who were there. So, and David Zarifis was definitely there. So I think you're really going to enjoy this video, this interview. So thank you so much for tuning in and watching, and I hope you enjoy it, and I'll see you in the next video. Got some really good stuff coming up. I think you're going to like it. All right, David Zarifis, how you doing today, sir?
I'm doing well.
All right, thank you for being here today, sir. It's an honor to be able to sit and talk with you. So,
my pleasure.
Tell me a little bit about your life as a young man. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in a town, Waterloo, Iowa, famously known for John Deere tractor manufacturing. I was born in 1950. Raised in Waterloo all the way up until the time that I enlisted in the Marine Corps in 1968.
1968. Okay, do you have any brothers or sisters?
Yeah, I have 4 brothers, and none of them have been in the military. Well, my youngest brother was in the Navy after Vietnam, okay. But I was the first to be in the military.
Okay, did you graduate high school in Waterloo?
Yes, I did. In 1968. I graduated in June of 1968, and about a week and a half later, I was going to boot camp.
Okay, did you play any sports in high school?
No, not really. I tried to wrestle a little bit and tried a little bit of boxing, but no, not really.
Okay. I'm not too good at the boxing?
Yeah.
Okay, why did you choose the Marine Corps?
Well, back then, I thought if I'm going to enlist, I didn't want to invest into a lot of schooling and then get drafted, and who knows what happens. So I chose the Marine Corps because I thought they were the best at the time. Okay. Maybe that's just I fell for the promotion or something, but I don't regret having joined the Marine Corps.
Yes, sir. And how old were you?
18.
18. So you went straight from graduating high school to enlisting in the Marine Corps?
Yes.
Okay. Now, where did you go to boot camp?
Went to boot camp in San Diego. Marine Corps recruit depot in San Diego with a buddy of mine, Dave Davis. We enlisted in the buddy plan, which allowed us to at least go through boot camp, and then after that it was kind of a toss-up as to where we went and what our military occupational skill was, the MOS. He and I went through boot camp and then went through, after that went through ITR, Infantry Training Regiment, at Pendleton. And I went to gunner school, the M60, and Dave went to the 0311, basically infantry. So we kind of got split up there, but we were able to still see each other.
How long was your boot camp training?
Pardon me. That, as I recall, it was about 12 or 16 weeks.
Okay. Did you enjoy it?
It was a lot of work, a lot of, actually a lot of learning the different different things that were required to do in the Marine Corps. They issued us a Marine Corps guide, which we called the Bible. We carried that with us every place we went during boot camp. A lot of physical training. We used to go on long runs with packs. So a lot of learning the ranks of both the Navy and the Marine Corps, and just different parts of the Marine Corps and the operations and that sort of thing. But just a lot though of physical exercise.
Now, how much did those packs weigh?
Oh, it depended, but usually around 20, 25 pounds plus all the other stuff that you carried.
Yes, sir. Tell me about an average day in boot camp, from like when you wake up in the morning till you hit the rack in the evening.
You have a reveille. You wake up in the morning and you muster out in front of your Quonset hut, which is what we stayed in. And there'd be an inspection, hygiene inspection, and then they'd do a barracks inspection. And if there was anything wrong, they would tear everything up. You'd have to go back in and do it again. And then they would plan out the day. On Sundays it was church. And you'd march to Chow Hall for your breakfast, and you were only given so much time to eat, and it didn't matter, whether you were done or not. You better not be a slow eater. And then you'd muster outside the Chow Hall, and that would begin your day, whether it was any kind of classes or, but you always had some kind of physical activity during that day.
Now, how was the chow? Did they feed you well?
Yeah, it wasn't. I mean, it was okay.
Okay. Now, tell me a little more about your weapons training. I believe you mentioned the M60. Did you train with anything else?
Yeah, the M16 and M14 is what we qualified with when we went to Pendleton at the range. Pardon me. But I actually got my first stripe out of gunner school, and that's the M60. And you shot at a target, actually. So there were different patterns that you had to follow, and like I said, I got my first stripe out of there. So
Okay.
PFC at that time.
Private first class, yes, sir. Now, you enlisted? Did you know that you were going to Vietnam?
Well, I was a 2-year enlistee, so it was pretty evident, and then with my MOS, that it was going to be time in Vietnam.
So you knew that the Vietnam War was going on. It was well publicized, that you knew that you would probably be
absolutely.
going.
I mean, it had been on TV for, Walter Cronkite had talked about it for years on the 6 o'clock news, and so was very much aware of at least what was being told was happening.
And David, what year was this?
1968 is when I went in.
And what were your thoughts about going to Vietnam, sir?
I'd have to say I was apprehensive. I mean, you know, we're talking about warfare where people are dying on both sides. So it was disturbing, I guess. But the other option was to go through 4 years of school and, depending on what happened, you know, end up getting drafted.
Yes, sir.
So if I was going to do it, I wanted to do it and get it over with.
So your basic training was in San Diego?
Yes, sir.
And then after the basic training was over, you hopped on a plane and went to where?
No, we drove on buses up to Camp Pendleton.
Okay.
And there I went through the infantry training. That's where my gunner school was. And went through that training and then went home on leave.
You went home on leave before you went to Vietnam?
Oh, yes, sir.
Okay. Now, how long were you on leave?
I think it was 2 weeks.
Okay. Went back to Iowa for a couple of weeks, and then tell me about what happened after that.
We went back to Iowa and then went back to Pendleton, and I was assigned with the 28th Marines. There was apparently a slowdown in shipping people over to Vietnam at the time. And so I spent roughly 2 or 3 months with the 28th Marines in Camp Pendleton. And then from there, once I got orders for Vietnam, I went to what's called Staging Battalion. And that's, I can't remember, it was 2 or 3 weeks where they would give you information about Vietnam, what you were going to face, what the people were like, what the climate was like, what the terrain was like. Kind of get you so that you were aware of what you were going into and what you might face and those sorts of things.
Okay. So after that, then you got on a plane and went to Vietnam.
You got on a plane and went to Okinawa.
Okay. What did you do in Okinawa?
In Okinawa, basically, you're getting processed to go to Vietnam. So you're getting shots, and that was about it. And then getting processed, and then, as I recall, we were there a couple weeks, and it was an interesting time in Okinawa the first time there because you were able to go to an EM club in which you had guys who were going back to Vietnam that had been Medevac to Japan or wherever and were being sent back to Vietnam via Okinawa. So you were hearing all kinds of stories from them about what it was like and the weather and all that sort of thing. So, and I can't remember the conversations. I just knew that they called this EM club the Animal Pit because it got pretty rough at times.
Now you said you got shots on Okinawa. What kind of shots were you getting?
Got a blood thickener shot, and I'm not sure what it was, but you got it in the butt, and I remember it was a hell of a long needle.
Yeah.
And then just some other things, and you were getting checked out before you went to Vietnam, and it was basically a medical check.
Okay, so you went from Okinawa to
Da Nang.
Da Nang. Okay, so you arrived in country. What was it like when you stepped off the plane? I've heard people say that it's hot and muggy and had a smell in the air.
Yeah, I've watched some of the interviews with other veterans that have talked about. I didn't even have to get off the plane. It was just opening the door, and the swell of heat just encompassed everything inside the plane, and it was a muggy, musty smell, and endured that for a year.
A year.
Pardon me.
And what was your company, sir?
I was eventually signed to Kilo Company, 3rd Battalion, 1st Marines.
Kilo Company. And what was your job in Vietnam?
Well, actually, my MOS was machine gunner, but after I got in country, I was assigned to carry a radio.
Okay. Tell me a little bit about that. What would you do on the radio?
Just basically communications when you're on patrols. When you're out on night operations, there's radio check-ins. And you were there for the squad leader or a platoon leader if need be. Platoon leader had his own radio man, but we would interact with other companies and within our platoon on operations.
Okay.
We go on patrols, we'd check in, check out. On night ambushes, we'd get radio calls to see what our condition was and make sure we were awake and that sort of thing.
Now, when you got in country, did you go straight to the front lines, or was there a more processing for you to do? What happened when you got in country?
When I got assigned to my unit, we were shipped off to where their CP or command post compound was, and we were issued jungle utilities, issued an M16, and we'd sight in our M16s, and then get all ready, and then we'd be assigned to which platoon and squad that we were in.
Okay, and you were assigned to an infantry platoon?
Yes, I was 3rd platoon.
Okay, and you were a private first class when you arrived?
Yes.
Okay, and you were eventually promoted to a full corporal?
Lance corporal and then corporal.
Okay. So
later on.
Okay, so tell me about that. How did that happen?
I was promoted to corporal after I'd been over there around 9 months, and I switched from my platoon to the company battalion male orderly, and that's when I got my promotion to corporal. And I spent my last 3.5 months as battalion male clerk, which was a pretty good job.
So being a new guy, did they ever refer to you as a FNG?
Yes, many times.
Yeah. New guys usually have to walk point, I think, but you being a radio man, how did that work out for you?
It was my experience that new guys never walk point. Walking point is a very, it's a complex position to be put in because you have to be alert not only to all your surroundings around you, but what's in front of you. And experience will teach you what to look for and what to avoid. So you don't want the new guys walking point if they're not familiar with booby traps, with different telling things that you can spot as a point man with experience.
Did you see any of the booby traps?
Yeah, I saw some of the what we called toe poppers, which would they'd take a round that was unexploded, bury a nail, and put the round on top of the nail and cover it up. And then when somebody would step on it, that would go through their foot, or depending on where they stepped on it, might even go up through their leg.
And radio guy, did you carry a weapon also?
Yes, M16.
M16. Did you carry any grenades?
No, I didn't. That was extra weight, and we had plenty of guys to carry them. We always carried an extra bandolier of M60 ammo, about 100 rounds. But we had radio men, they had a 25-pound radio, an extra battery, all your gear that you needed, canteens for water, your food, and then your ammo, and I usually carried about a bandolier of magazines, so you had extra ammo.
Okay, so when you're out on patrol, do you have a destination you're going to, or what are you doing out on patrol?
Well, during day patrols, there are certain routes that we would take. We'd never take the same route, but we would basically patrol around the area that we were assigned, our platoon patrol base or whatever. We'd do day patrols, and we'd also do night patrols, night ambushes. So that basically was what we did when we were in operational areas in country, in the field.
Now, was that heavy foliage? It looked like a lot of jungle warfare there.
The area that we were in was, it's called a TOR, it's Tactical Operational Area, or TOR. And what we were experiencing was a lot of rice paddies and tree lines. So as you were crossing rice paddies, you were always vulnerable to any kind of fire from the tree lines.
Any sniper fire?
Many times.
Many times. So did you...
Pardon me.
It's okay. Did you see any combat?
Yes.
Did you want to talk about that?
Probably the most impactful thing that I had, and I've not really shared this with a lot of people other than the people that experienced it along with myself. In April of '69, we were operating in an area where we were told was NVA in and around that area. We came upon a tree line after we were out on company operation, and we found a lot of NVA stuff. We found rice, we found North Vietnamese flags, and we had some initial contact. We set up a perimeter in that area where we had found this stuff, and we sent out LP posts, which are listening posts. The LP that I was in, listening post that I was in, we had made some contact. We saw movement, fired upon that movement, and then got back into our perimeter that night. And we had some sporadic fire, but not much. The next morning, we set out in the general area that we thought the NVA had gone. And as we started going through the area, I recall there were 3 individuals that got up and ran in front of our position. Pardon me. Our squad leader, there was a squad leader for one of the squads by the name of Anderson, he got up and started chasing them. The minute he got through these, there were these hills and then walk areas in between them. Well, the NVA had dug in behind the hills, so after you went through, you were exposed to them in the backside. He was shot and went down. And I can remember, because I was maybe 30, 40 feet behind him, he got up on his hands, looked at where the round had come from, where the firing had come from. And I saw a Chi-Com, which is a grenade, being thrown. And I saw him fall down, get down on the ground. And the next thing I saw was his body coming up, probably 4 foot off the ground, turning over. Our Lieutenant Christensen, had crawled up by that area, and he'd been shot and killed. So we continued to make contact, and because they were dug in on the backside of these moguls, we withdrew a little bit and then called in air support. And that's when they called in the Phantoms. And the Phantoms came in at treetop level, dropping 500-pound bombs. We were far enough back that nobody got hurt, but the ground just shook. And that was when, they always said, if they allow you to see them, there's a reason for that. And when those 3 guys got up, that's when Johnny ran after them and never even thought about something on the backside of that mogul.
Now, for those who don't know, could you explain the difference between the NVA and the VC?
The VC were the local guerrilla, the locals that fought. The NVA were the trained North Vietnamese army.
Right.
In my experience, the difference was if the VC were outgunned, they'd leave. The NVA would dig in and they would fight.
Right. So they're a well-trained army.
Yes.
The NVA. So you lost some close friends.
Yes, many.
Were you able to help any of the wounded soldiers in any of the firefights you were in?
There was an incident that happened on a place that was called No Name Island in Vietnam, and it was southwest of Da Nang, close to the ocean. We had 3 different patrol bases, one back at the company headquarters, one at a location we called the Leprosarium, and then one at No Name Island. And we would rotate between those 3 positions. Pardon me. On June 7th of 1969, at around, it was just a little after midnight, our squad was selected to go out on night ambush that night. For some reason I can't recall, we were a little late in getting out, and around midnight we were getting mortared, and they were walking the mortar rounds into the compound, getting an idea of the distance. From one side of the compound, I ran over to my bunker and grabbed my M16. It had what's called a plunger for your claymore mines, which were kind of a round thing like this. And it had little ball bearings on it, and it had a charge behind it, and it would shoot out. I tried to get the plunger to hit the plunger, and for some reason it wasn't working. They had taken some of the claymores that were on the outside of the perimeter and turned them around. So if you blew them, they were blowing at neck and hitting you. And once I got in my bunker, the next thing I ever recall was this just white flash. I couldn't hear anything. I couldn't see anything. My bunker had been hit with an RPG. I couldn't hear, I couldn't see. I kept doing this, and I thought, this must be what it's like to be dead. And I'm not sure how long I was in that state, but I had a buddy who was into the machine guns in our unit by the name of Martin, and he crawled through one little opening on the side of our bunker, just check on us, see if we're okay. Or another guy in the bunker, and he was okay. But I had sandbags all over me. My M16 was busted, and I couldn't do anything. And once I told him I was okay, he started to crawl out. And as he crawled out, I heard this explosion. And I knew it was close, and I was there trapped in my bunker, and I could feel this warm feeling on my leg, and it was he'd been killed, and his blood was running on my leg. I need a minute.
Take your time.
And I've never forgotten that. Thank you. It was just shortly after that I could see these people coming over the bunker. And it was VC, NVA, I believe what they indicated was it was an NVA group that overran us. What was very interesting is that the orders given by the enemy were in English. They thought that it was a guy that had been turned traitor, basically, in Bobby Garwood. And there's a book, The Spite House, that talks about Bobby Garwood and his ordeal. They later found out, years and years and years after that, that it was not Bobby Garwood. But it was an American, they believed. They were pretty sure that was giving these combat orders in English. But our platoon was decimated that night. 48 out of 52 of my unit were wounded or killed. And one guy was outside the wire, and he was tortured. My good friend, last name is Sandlin, he had been caught outside the wire. I'm not sure how. Never really found out a lot of what happened that night until we had a reunion of the guys that survived No Name that had been wounded and medevaced out. And I think it was around 2000 or somewhere in that area where we had a reunion in Virginia Beach. And it was then that we were able to kind of piece together where everybody had been and what had happened that night. Because everybody was just gone. They were medevaced and out of country, and several of them that came back were in different units when they came back. So, and it was after that night that, you know, I was medevaced, was out of the hospital. When I was in the hospital, I could see Lieutenant Baldwin. And again, I remember seeing him laying on the gurney in the operating table with his foot hanging by a tendon. And that night lives with me forever.
Well, take me back just a little bit. Your bunker was hit with the RPG. You were trapped. Had sandbags all over you. How did you get out?
I was eventually, they pulled sandbags off of me after the enemy had, for some reason the enemy had left. Excuse me. And then they were coming around trying to find everybody. And it was then that they got stuff pulled off of me.
Okay. And you were taken to hospital. How long were you in the hospital?
Well, I try and help medevac some of the guys. I was in the hospital for 3 days. Concussion, mainly. And then I remember getting chewed out by a second lieutenant for having dirty utilities on, and I'd just been released from the hospital. I don't know why I remember that, but then I went back to the unit, and the unit was all different. The day after, or day or two after we were hit at No Name, that platoon patrol base was blown up by phantoms. And I always wondered why we were even there. I mean, that outpost could be nothing more than having bait for the enemy. There was no real military purpose other than we were close to Marble Mountain, which was a very hot area. The support that we got after we were hit at No Name came from the area around Marble Mountain. It was Green Beret and Mountain Yards who were the first to get in and get to us. And then the platoon from leprosarium came up and was there. We had medevacs coming in and out for probably 45 minutes. But they had big illumination rounds that came around the whole area that lit it up like day. And so that was what happened that night.
So you got out of the hospital, you went back to the unit.
Mm-hmm.
Was
All new people, pretty
all new
much.
people. Were you the only one that returned?
No, there were several others that returned. There were 4 of us. When I returned from the hospital, I'm not sure how many others had returned from the hospital, but there was only 4 of us back in the unit at that time.
So did you see any more combat after that, or?
Yeah. I was still in the field for several months. In August of '69, I was medevaced for a heat stroke. We were out on a platoon operation, and we had taken a break. I had put my radio down, tried to find some shade, but I wasn't sweating, and I was just overheating. I could feel myself. I was getting dizzy, and our corpsman came over and checked on me and right away called a medevac. So I was medevaced out of the field into Da Nang Hospital. And I can remember the way they treated me was they put me on a gurney and they put a white sheet over me and they poured ice on me. And I really didn't like that too much. They ended up having to strap me down and pouring the ice on me to get my temperature down. And so I was in the hospital for about a week after that. And then ended up going back to my unit. And then I'm not sure if it was September or October that I had a change in what I was doing overseas. I was able to get out of the field and became the battalion mail clerk, which it was a good job. I would get on a vehicle and drive into Da Nang and get the mail and boxes and everything and bring it back for the company. So I was delivering mail and was well treated.
So tell me a little bit about, you said you were there in the rainy season. So
Monsoon.
Yeah, the monsoon. So tell me a little bit about that, what we talked about earlier.
The monsoon it's buckets and buckets and buckets of rain that come down. It covered all the roadways. So pretty much the operations were limited, if anything at all, because of the high water. There were a couple times where we had to walk along the sides of the road so that the 6-bys with supplies and whatever they were bringing in or trying to take out.
Now, explain what a 6-by is.
It's a big truck that's used to haul, soldiers, troops, haul the troops, and heavy loads that they would bring in and out. It's like a big dump truck, only you've got seats in it, and so.
Now tell about your socks and your feet, like we
Oh
talked
yeah,
about.
One of the biggest things that you could do if you were in the field was to keep your feet dry and keep it. I had, and it was hard to do because you were either sweating or you were walking in water or whatever. And I had infection in my toes, and they were all kind of scabbed together because of the heat and the water and it was really painful. And I ended up going to the corpsman to get treated several times for that.
Yeah.
We always carried extra socks.
Right. So you spent a year in Vietnam. Do you remember your last day there?
I remember the last night I paid somebody $25 to stand my watch because I was heading out the next day. So last day there, just wrapping things up, getting stuff turned in, getting my orders. I had re-upped for position at brig duty in the Great Lakes, and when I got my final orders, the orders were for Camp Lejeune. And when I got back to the States after processing, going back to Okinawa and processing there, and then getting back to the States, they gave me the option to go to Camp Lejeune, or I could get out because I was a 2-year enlistee. And that was in February of '70, and my time would have been up in June of '70. So they just gave me an early out, credited me for time.
Yeah. Now, $25 back in 1969, that was a little chunk of change, wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
Especially on my wages. But I didn't. It was last night there. You get, you're a short timer. The 2 people to stay away from, they always said, was the new guys and the guys that are short. Used to say, "I'm not short, I'm next," because of what they've been through for a year. You just never know. And so if you have an opportunity to reduce your risk, you're going to do it.
Yeah. Now tell me about the trip back home, when you left, and how long did it take you to get back home, and what was getting back home like for you?
Left Vietnam, go back to Okinawa, and get processed. And then from there, we went to Norton Air Force Base in Northern California, and I got processed there. And I can't remember exactly where we got shipped to, but I can remember going to LA, and we sat in some kind of a game show one day, and then got on the bus and went back. It was just 2 or 3 days before we got our final discharge and orders. And I can remember I called my fiance, who is now my wife, and has been for 52 years, that I was headed home. And so we used to fly military standby, but this time I bought a ticket. I did not want to have to wait and see if somebody wasn't going to be on the flight or it wasn't overbooked. I wasn't going to miss that flight. So flew from LA to Omaha, and then from Omaha to Des Moines, Iowa. And my brother and my fiance picked me up there.
Was it hard adjusting back to civilian life after a year in Vietnam?
Yeah, I think the hardest part for me was at night. It was just different. I mean, you're used to standing night watch even after I was out of the field. The nights were difficult. Loud noises were difficult. But I never really talked to a lot of people about my experience there. You had so much angst and just different feelings that, I didn't want conflict.
So you were still, what, 20, 21 when you got back home?
I was, I was out in February of '70 and turned 20 about 3 weeks later.
So what did you do after the war? What kind of career did you have?
First of all, I attempted to go to a junior college, and for some reason it just didn't click with me. So I went back to my hometown and enrolled into a police science course. So I was 2 years in a police science course 1 year of which was a cadet program, and worked for a police department during that time, during my training, and then eventually got hired by that police department and worked there for about 9 years.
Okay.
And from there, I decided that I wanted to further my education. I had an associate's degree. So I went on, got a different job that allowed me to financially to work and get my BA degree. And from there, I went to work for the state as a special investigator for the Department of Human Services. And then from there, I went to the University of Northern Iowa and worked in their public safety department, and for the last 25 years of my career was the chief of police, director of public safety there.
Oh.
Retiring, and when the wife retired a year or 2 years after I did, we decided we wanted an excursion, so we decided to move to Wilmington, North Carolina.
Well, congratulations. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep. Have you ever been to the Vietnam Memorial in Washington?
Yes. When we had our reunion with the guys that I knew in Vietnam, we took a trip up to the wall. That was the first time that I'd been there. My recollection was it took me about a half an hour before I could get to the wall. I couldn't. I had to just take it in. When you realize the impact and the number of lives that we lost there.
Yeah, about what, 58,000 or so?
Yes.
Did you get any etchings?
Yes.
Good. You stay
Down
in
to
touch
Dave
with...
Davis,
Yes, sir.
who was who I went in with. Dave Hartaw, who I had seen in China Beach after I got out of the hospital, and then a good friend of mine growing up, Jeff Wilson.
You stay in touch with any of your Vietnam friends?
Yes, I do. A couple of them.
Okay.
A couple of them. I've been to one reunion. It's a Kilo Company reunion, and that was up in Minnesota. And I only went to one. But I saw the people that I wanted to see.
Okay, good. Well, did you have anything else that you'd like to add to the video?
I don't believe so.
Okay. David Zarifis, I sure do appreciate you being here today, and thank you for your service to our country.
Thank you.
It's very well appreciated, sir. It's been an honor sitting here talking with you.
Thank you.